On the morning of July 19th, 1944, the battlefield is already burning. Smoke crawls across the shattered fields, clinging to broken trees and silent bodies. Artillery rumbles somewhere beyond the horizon, a sound that feels less like thunder and more like a warning. Inside the ruins of a machine gun nest, a single figure refuses to fall back. Dust settles on his helmet. Blood darkens his sleeve. Yet the weapon in front of him keeps speaking. Short, furious bursts cutting through the haze. Most men would be unconscious by now. Many would be dead. But this gunner, he shifts, steadies himself, and forces the machine gun back into line. With only one functioning hand, he drags the trigger again. The enemy believes the position is finished. The smoke believes it too. But the gun still roars. Long before the smoke, before the torn earth and the ringing steel, he was simply Anton, a quiet farm boy who had learned the rhythm of life from the soil of Eastern Europe. Not a hero, not a legend, just another young man swept into the vast machinery of 1944. His unit knew him for his steadiness. Not loud, not reckless, steady. He listened more than he spoke, smiled more than he complained. When others argued over cigarettes or letters from home, Anton would sit on an overturned crate, oiling the machine gun piece by piece, like someone tending to an old friend. They called him the Calm One, a strange title in a season when calm was a memory. In the weeks before the Great Offensive, the battalion rested behind a line of birch trees, their white trunks glowing under moonlight. Nights were cold, but there was laughter, the kind soldiers create to push back the dark. Someone played a harmonica. Someone else roasted stolen potatoes over a small fire. Boots steamed beside drying coats. For a moment, war felt distant, almost unreal. Anton kept watch during these nights, not because he was ordered to, but because he understood something the others didn't say out loud. Peace like this was borrowed. It would be taken back soon. Every soldier carried fears. Some hid them in jokes. Some drowned them in sleep. Anton hid his in habit, cleaning the gun, counting the belts, memorizing each click and clatter. His hands knew every edge of the metal. They moved with the certainty of a man preparing for a storm no one could escape. On the last evening before the march to the front, his squad shared a single bottle of cheap vodka. They talked about home, not the war, not death, never the future, just home, a dog, a field, a girl someone hoped would wait. Anton said little, but when he looked up at the sky, there was something in his eyes, not fear, not pride, something quieter, a man who knows that tomorrow will ask more of him than yesterday ever did. The march began before sunrise, when the world was still half asleep and the fields were wrapped in a pale grey mist. Boots thudded against the dirt road in tired rhythm. Engines growled. Behind the column, coughing up black exhaust that drifted through the air like a bitter omen. No one spoke much. Soldiers saved their voices before a fight, as if words might weaken the courage they are trying to hold together. Anton walked with his squad near the front of the column. His machine gun rode on his shoulder, wrapped in canvas to keep the dust out. To him, its weight was familiar, almost comforting. It reminded him of purpose, of duty, of something he could control when the world around him spun too fast. The officers rode past from time to time, scanning maps, exchanging stiff orders. They spoke softly, but their expressions said everything. The enemy was close, closer than the men realized. Somewhere ahead, tanks had been sighted. Infantry movements increased. A storm was massing beyond the tree line. As the miles slipped beneath their feet, the mood changed. The laughter of camp faded. The warmth of firelight became a memory. In its place came silence, heavy, honest silence. Men marched with their own thoughts now. Some thought of home, some of glory. Many thought of nothing at all, letting the rhythm of marching numb whatever waited inside them. Anton kept scanning the distant ridge lines. Not paranoia, instinct. He had survived enough skirmishes to understand the shape of danger before it revealed itself. The air gets tighter, birds vanish. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. By noon, they halted beside a ruined village. Roofs collapsed, wells shattered, windows empty. The place smelled of smoke, even though the fires had died weeks earlier. A reminder that the front moved like a tide, swallowing lives, leaving ghosts. The battalion dispersed through the rubble, checking houses, clearing streets, mapping defensive points. It was here that Anton's reputation resurfaced. Everyone knew the machine gun team mattered more than most. When a position broke, it was the automatic weapons that kept the line from dissolving into chaos. And more than once, Anton's fire had held longer than anyone else's. As they set up temporary shelter in what used to be a bakery, a young replacement, barely 18, watched Anton with quiet awe. "Is it true," he finally asked, "that you kept firing during the river crossing, even with shrapnel in your leg?" Anton didn't look up from the gun he was assembling. "It was only a small piece," he said. "You still hit 20 targets," the boy whispered. Anton shrugged. "We all have jobs," but the boy didn't understand. Not yet. Most of them wouldn't understand until the moment came. The moment when fear and duty collide, and a man discovers who he really is. Even then, Anton was already preparing. He felt the storm coming, and he knew this march was only the beginning. Dawn did not arrive gently on July 19th, 1944. It crashed into the horizon with the force of a hammer. Anton had barely slept. No one had. The battalion dug in along a shallow ridge through the night, tracing lines in the soil, stacking ammunition, whispering last-minute orders. The air felt unnaturally still, too still, as if the world itself were waiting for something to ignite. At 0437, it did. The first artillery shell landed behind them with a roar that shook dirt from helmets. Then another, then a dozen more. The sky turned red as the barrage rolled forward like a hungry wave, smashing trees, lifting earth, tearing trenches apart. Men pressed themselves into the ground, covering their heads, praying the next blast wouldn't have their name on it. Anton didn't pray. He listened. Artillery has a language. High whistles mean distance. Deep rumbles mean danger. But when the sound begins to flatten into a constant, suffocating thunder, that means the attack is coming. Through the smoke, runners shouted orders. Machine gun crews scrambled into position. Riflemen crawled to the edge of their foxholes, blinking dust from their eyes. Their breath fogged in the cold morning air. Anton and his team slid into their emplacement. A few sandbags, a broken wooden beam, and a field of tall yellow grass ahead. Not ideal, not safe, but war rarely offers choices. "Belts ready?" he asked. "3 full, 2 half," his assistant gunner replied, hands trembling slightly. Anton nodded, but kept his eyes forward. The artillery suddenly faded, not stopping, but shifting farther back. That was the sign. Seconds later came the shapes, dark figures moving through the smoke, first as shadows, then as soldiers. They advanced in waves, rifles glinting, bayonets catching the weak morning light. "Hold," Anton whispered. "Closer, closer, now." The machine gun snapped into life, its rhythm sharp and relentless. The recoil drove into his shoulder, familiar and grounding. Brass casings sprayed across the dirt as he swept the barrel across the field. The first wave staggered. The second dropped to the ground. Some fought back, firing blind through the smoke, but the enemy kept coming. Anton's world narrowed into sound and motion. The bark of the gun, the burning smell of oil, the shaking earth beneath him. A grenade exploded to his left, showering the trench with splinters. Men shouted. Officers screamed for medics. The sun finally rose through the haze, but it brought no light, only a clearer view of the storm descending upon them. The battle for the ridge had begun, and the day was far from done with them. War changes direction in a heartbeat. For Anton, that heartbeat came just after Zo 6 and Rock. His gun had already fired hundreds of rounds. The barrel smoked. His crew shouted for more belts, passing ammunition with frantic hands. The grass in front of their position had been cut down by bullets, turning the field into a tangle of crushed yellow and dark soil. Then a new sound rose above the battle, a deeper, angrier whistle. Mortars! Down! Someone yelled. Anton threw himself against the sandbags, but the world erupted before he hit the ground. A blast tore through the left side of their emplacement, flipping sandbags, ripping wood apart, and lifting men off their feet as if they weighed nothing at all. For a moment, silence. Then, pain. Anton tried to push himself up, but his left arm refused to obey. Blood soaked through the sleeve, warm against the cold morning wind. Shattered bone, he realized, or worse. His assistant gunner lay unconscious beside him, face pale, chest rising only slightly. Voices echoed from somewhere beyond the ringing in his ears. "Medic, we're hit! The flank is breaking!" The machine gun lay half buried in dirt, its tripod twisted, its feed cover open. Smoke curled from the ruptured sandbags around it. The position looked dead, and to the enemy now pushing forward, it likely was. Anton should have crawled back, should have called for help, should have given up the position like any wounded man, but something inside him refused. Gritting his teeth, he dragged himself to the weapon. His right hand shook as he cleared the dirt from the receiver. Pain flared through his body, but he forced it down. One task at a time, one movement at a time. A fresh belt lay half buried nearby. He hooked it with his boot, pulled it close, and used his one good hand to feed it into place. Slow, clumsy, agonizing. Footsteps approached through the smoke. Enemy infantry, advancing in confidence, believing the ridge was theirs. Anton braced the gun against the ruined beam. His shoulder burned, his vision blurred, but his finger found the trigger. The machine gun roared back to life. Shouts erupted from the field as the advancing troops were caught off guard by the sudden resurrection of fire. The enemy staggered, ducked, scattered. Anton's left arm hung useless, blood dripping onto the dirt, but the gun kept firing with one hand and a will stronger than the pain. Pain has a strange way of sharpening the world. Every heartbeat becomes a drum, every breath a battle. For Anton, that pain was fire running through his shattered arm, but the moment his finger squeezed the trigger again, the agony faded behind something stronger, purpose. The gun bucked violently, without a second hand to steady it. Every burst shook his entire body. He leaned his weight into the frame, pressing his shoulder against the splintered beam to keep the barrel from climbing. Hot brass rained across his legs. Each casing stung when it touched skin, but he barely felt it. The enemy clearly did. Their confidence cracked. Soldiers who had been sprinting to exploit the breach now dropped to their knees, scrambling for cover. They thought the nest was destroyed. The sudden resurrection of fire confused them, slowed them, forced them to crawl instead of charge. Seconds bought, precious seconds. Anton struggled to reload. Feeding a belt with one hand was madness, a clumsy dance of teeth, knees, and desperation. 3 times the belt slipped from the socket. 3 times he cursed under his breath, forcing himself to focus. The 4th time, it clicked. He yanked the cover shut with his elbow and dragged the trigger again. His world shrank into rhythm. Fire, breathe. Fire, breathe. Ignore the shaking. Ignore the blood. Keep shooting. Behind him, scattered voices of his comrades rose again. He's still firing. Hold the line. Reinforce the ridge. Somewhere down the trench, an officer shouted, "Buy me 5 minutes." Anton didn't hear the rest. He had no minutes, only bullets, and the will to spend them. Through the drifting smoke, figures emerged again. The second wave, closer, angrier. Their rifles cracked in response. Bullets snapped past his head, punched holes through the sandbags, sprayed him with dirt. One round grazed his helmet, ringing his skull with a painful metallic hum. He stayed upright. The gun chattered. The field trembled. The advance faltered once more. Anton's right arm began to weaken. Every pull of the trigger sent a tremor through it. His hand grew slick with sweat and blood. The weapon seemed heavier now, as though the war itself pressed down on it. Still, he fired. At one point, he tried to lift the gun slightly to adjust angle, forgetting his left arm was useless. A jolt of agony nearly blacked out his vision. He bit down on a scream, tasted iron, and steadied himself against the earth. "Not yet," he whispered to no one. Behind him, medics finally reached the trench, but froze when they saw the position under open fire. One shouted for Anton to fall back, to let them drag him to safety. He didn't answer. Safety had no meaning here. Only the ridge mattered. Only the men behind him. A grenade exploded meters away, showering him with soil. Splinters tore at his coat. He flinched, but kept firing, refusing to surrender even a moment of control. Then he heard something new. The rumble of engines, friendly engines, reinforcements cresting the rear slope. His fire had bought the minutes they needed. The enemy, seeing the line reform, hesitated. The second wave dissolved into scattered movement. Orders shouted in panic. The tide was turning, slowly, painfully, because one man refused to let it break. Anton's vision blurred, his strength fading, but his hand, his one good hand, still held the trigger until the very last belt was empty. When Anton's final belt clattered empty, the battlefield exhaled, not in peace, but in shock. The ridge, moments from collapsing, was still in their hands. Smoke drifted like torn curtains across the field, revealing the effect of his defiance. Bodies scattered in broken arcs, enemy squads pinned behind shallow depressions and shattered trees, unsure whether the madman in the nest was finally finished. For the first time in nearly an hour, Anton sagged back from the gun. His vision pulsed. His left arm hung lifeless, a dead weight soaked in dark blood. The world tilted around him, colors blurring into a dull red haze. But behind him, voices, movement, life returning to the trench. Reinforcements poured in from the rear slope. Riflemen, machine gun teams, even a light armored carrier grinding forward through churned soil. Officers pointed toward the field, shouting new firing lines, pushing men into position. They had expected to retake a lost flank. Instead, they found it still standing, held by one stubborn, wounded gunner who refused to let it fall. "Who the hell kept this position alive?" someone shouted. A soldier pointed to the ruined nest. "Him, by himself." The disbelief spread quickly. Some shook their heads. Others stared in silence at the torn emplacement, the twisted tripod, the trail of empty casings shining like brass water. Anton tried to push himself upright when his squad reached him, but his strength failed. Two men caught him before he collapsed, lowering him gently into the mud. His right hand was cramped around the trigger grip, refusing to open even as consciousness slipped. "You saved the ridge," one soldier murmured, kneeling beside him. Anton didn't answer, not out of pride, but because he no longer had the breath. Behind them, the reinforced line opened fire, driving the enemy back down the slope. The counterattack intensified, fueled by the minutes Anton had carved out of pain and willpower. The ridge held, because one man with one hand refused to surrender it. When the firing finally ebbed into scattered cracks, the ridge fell into a strange, fragile quiet, the kind that feels borrowed, uncertain, as if the battle might return at any moment. Smoke drifted low across the trenches, mixing with the metallic scent of blood. The morning sun, now higher, revealed the human cost carved into every meter of the ground. Anton lay propped against a sandbag, his breathing shallow, each rise of his chest a small victory. Medics knelt beside him, their hands quick but gentle. They cut open his torn sleeve, revealing the ugly wound beneath. Mangled flesh, shattered bone, blood still pulsing slowly despite the cold. One medic exhaled sharply. "How is he alive?" Another shook his head. "How was he firing like that?" The questions hung in the air without answers. Around them, soldiers who had survived the battle gathered in small clusters. Some checked their weapons, others stared blankly at the horizon, unable to shake the ringing in their ears. A few approached Anton's position, drawn not by curiosity, but by the quiet gravity of what he had done. His squad leader crouched beside him, mud streaked across his face, eyes red from smoke and exhaustion. "Anton," he said softly, "you held them off. You bought us the time." Anton opened his eyes only halfway. There was no pride in them, no triumph, just a tired calm, the same calm that had defined him long before the battle. "I just stayed," he whispered. The squad leader nodded, swallowing hard. "You did more than stay." A young replacement, the same one who had once asked about his reputation, stood nearby, helmet in hand. He looked at Anton not with awe now, but with something deeper, gratitude mixed with fear, because he had seen what courage really cost. Behind the gathering soldiers, stretcher teams moved silently through the trenches. They carried the wounded first, then the dead. Names were whispered, then lost in the wind. War had a way of turning men into memories faster than anyone was ready for. Anton watched them work, his mind drifting between clarity and darkness. He didn't know if he would survive, didn't know if he would see another sunrise. But the ridge was still theirs. His comrades were alive. The line had not broken. In the end, that was enough. The medics lifted him onto a stretcher, securing his ruined arm as gently as they could. As they carried him away, soldiers along the trench turned to look, not in ceremony, not in salute, but in quiet acknowledgement. He had given everything he had, and the battlefield, for once, had given something back. Anton never knew what became of the battle after he was carried from the ridge. War blurs the edges of days, turning victories and losses into fragments that drift like smoke. Some say he survived the surgery. Others swear he died before nightfall. A few claim he woke weeks later, asking whether the line had held. but the truth matters less than the echo he left behind. In the days that followed, word of the one-handed gunner spread through the battalion, first as rumor, then as certainty. Officers spoke his name with disbelief. New recruits listened as if hearing a legend born in real time. Veterans shook their heads, knowing such things came only from a mixture of duty, desperation, and a heart that refused to quit. His machine gun nest, repaired and rebuilt, became a point of pride. Men would glance at it before taking their posts, reminded of what one soldier's defiance could mean. Some heroes are forged by orders, others by chance. Anton became something rarer, a man who turned pain into purpose, and purpose into survival for everyone around him. He fought with one hand, but carried the weight of the whole line.